World War I trench layouts. Unlike popular belief, trenches were not just straight tunnels. There were winding passageways of bunkers. The reason for this is because if an enemy soldier was looking over no man's land, and if he somehow got into the trench, he'd be able to deceive the enemy. Another reason is so that way the trenches wouldn't flood as much, so less soldiers were entitled to get trench foot, and it was less likely for soldiers to build bridges over them. While soldiers were charging over no man's land, they had to deal with machine guns in trenches, traps in trenches, rifles in trenches, landmines in trenches, and all sorts of other traps, including poison gas, sometimes even snakes. Trenches were designed for this reason, for loads of reasons, but the most common was so that way when an enemy soldier got inside the trench, they wouldn't be able to shoot around the corner. But it was also so that way tanks and cars and other vehicles would get stuck in the middle. This is some anti-tank trenches were made to stop tanks and cars. This concept started in the First World War, with the 1st Scottish Regiment of Maples coming up with the idea. Then it spread like wildfire across no man's land. As it spread, the trenches became narrower. The reason that they made them more narrow was to differentiate between an anti-tank trench and a normal trench. It made more sense to do it this way, otherwise soldiers would get confused. Trenches had fixed machine guns, but soldiers had to deal with poison gas, grenades, landmines, grenade crossbows, snipers, and more. Even just sticking your head over the trench for a fraction of a few seconds could see your head shot right in the skull. Soldiers were very brave in fighting in these trenches. Rats as big as cats lurked, as well as many other diseases like trench foot, plague, cholera, and more. Thousands of soldiers died in the trenches, but the most common was the mud collapsing on top of their heads, causing them to drown. In 1916, the British Army came up with a new helmet, the Brodie helmet. It was designed to stop debris from falling on soldiers' heads during combat, because of the narrow structure of the trenches, but they were also made to act as shovels in emergency cases. These helmets continued use in the Second World War. Just like this picture here, trench foot could be caused in muddy trenches if the person was inside a muddy trench for too long, even through boots. Soldiers had to stuff their boots with leather so that way the trench foot wouldn't affect them. Trenches were cramped inside the cold conditions. Trenches were not often warm. Soldiers needed to stay on the front lines, cold, trapped inside of small rooms. This made disease a breathing ground. And there was also barely any light, because any light would attract the enemy. When soldiers were being located to a trench, they would have to move on foot across no man's land. A perfect point for a German sniper, to shoot at them. It was a very dangerous task moving new soldiers into one trench to another. They were often moved at night. As trenches became more sophisticated with the war, they started to lessen. They realised that it was easier to dig a smaller trench than a big trench, also be less vulnerable to attacks in a smaller trench. Smaller trenches were made to combat this issue. But watchmen were still required. At night, watch guards were deployed in British trenches. The idea was that the soldier would watch at no man's land for enemy soldiers. But it was a dangerous task, as if they were fallen asleep or caught drunk at their post, they could get court-martialed and executed.